the Midwest Angler Podcast.
And welcome back to episode number 4 of the Midwest Angler Podcast. I'm Matt Deitch.
And I am Scott Sturman.
We got a good show for you tonight. We're talking about, we finally got on the ice.
Finally.
We were able to get over to Okoboji on Saturday. Going to kind of give you a summary of how that went. We're going to talk about some different types of baits that we like to use throughout the year. And at the end, we got a special segment tonight where I'm going to ask Scott a question and he's going to ask me one that we have no idea what the questions are yet. So we're just going to have to answer them kind of on the fly. So as far as our Okoboji trip this last Saturday, it was tough. It was a tough bite. I went over there a little earlier than you did, Scott, and we drilled a lot of holes and hopped around and stuff like that. We tried shallow, we tried deep. It was just kind of tough finding some of those fish.
Yep. Yeah, I had to pull dad duty in the morning, stepdad duty. Went over to Aubrey's basketball game. I got over there a little bit afternoon, and you guys had been there for a while. And, when I got there, you guys were away from the pack, and that was one thing that, I think, you don't got to compete with all the other guys out there, but
it did seem like when we got away from them a little bit is when we did start seeing a few more fish. I mean, the ice is still not real thick. I mean, we were probably on anywhere from 6 to 8 inches of ice, but I mean, further out in the lake, you could definitely tell that it wasn't safe to be out there. So everybody kind of was staying close to shore. And so we just kind of got away from them, from like not necessarily out further, just kind of away from everybody to the side. And then, like you said, it seemed like we started seeing more fish when we did that.
Yep. Now there was some really nice bluegills down there,
Oh yeah, they did the old, I always like to call it the old Okoboji back shuffle, where they come flying in like they're going to commit, and you're just like, oh yeah, here we go. And you're just kind of sitting there, and they get right up to it. They kind of just bump it, or they just kind of mouth it.
Reverse.
And boom, yep, out they go. And then it always seems like you'll be sitting there and you'll have a nice school underneath of you. Then pretty soon they all scatter, and here comes that northern swimming through the hole.
Yep, that's right. No, we had a lot of, I can't say a lot, but I mean, we saw the fish. We saw northern, we saw bass, we saw bluegills, and they really would come up, and they'd sit half-inch away from your jig and kind of open up their mouth and kind of suck a little bit, but it wasn't enough to suck the jig in. But
and it seemed like they're doing that a lot with the soft plastics, at least that I was using, but you seem to be having a little bit more luck with a wax worm.
Yeah, and that's just something I always use wax worms. I want to start using more plastics. I like that I don't have to switch, put new wax worms on all the time, but just something in me, ever since I was a little kid fishing with Grandpa, he always bought wax worms, and I've just always had more confidence with wax worms, so I keep going back to them.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, they catch fish. That's why. I mean, we don't really get out and get like wigglers a lot, and I think one of these times maybe we need to get some of those or some spikes.
Yep.
And try those if
red.
Maybe that's maybe that can be the key to just it's just little tweaks that we try to figure out, like what we're doing wrong, because the fish are reacting to something we're obviously not doing the right way or doing the wrong way. So we got to try to figure out how to get those things to commit to bite.
Yep. Yeah, well, when I got over there, we were in, 8 to 9 foot of water, sight fishing there on Emerson, on West Okoboji. That's really nice. And, I was using I started using a small black custom jigs and spins check-eye jig with one wax worm on it. And, what were you using, check-eye jig also, or?
I had a 13 Dougie jig with a 13 sneak plastic. And, I mean, they were coming in, and like I said, they were grabbing it, but they just wouldn't fully commit. It'd be like, okay, they just need to open up that mouth and inhale one more time, or it's going to be they're going to spit it out. Well, and most times it was they spit it out. I mean, if I would have set the hook, I would have just pulled it out of their mouth anyways.
Yep, yeah. Yeah, we ended up getting a few bluegills and a couple largemouth bass. Ramsey caught a couple bluegills, and did Ramsey get a bass before I got there?
No, he didn't. But, I mean, all in all, it was It is just nice to be back out on the
Oh,
ice.
yeah.
I mean, we've had that itch for a long time, so it was kind of nice to be able to get out there and scratch it. I mean, and it was fairly busy. I mean, I thought it might have been a little busier than what it was, but there was quite a few people when we got there, but they all kind of started to leave. It didn't really look like a lot of people were having good luck. I mean, I saw some pictures online that there was a few people that found the fish and got them to commit and bite, but I mean, we tried.
Yep.
And it just didn't happen for us, and that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, later around 3:30 we ended up picking up and moving over to East Okoboji, and we were the only ones on the lake over there. And
Yeah, that we could see, just us and the geese.
yep, oh, lots of geese.
But yeah, and actually that I was expecting that ice to be a lot better than what it really was. I mean,
Yeah, no, it was not great.
I mean, we had, close to shore, we got out there and just drilled our way out, and we probably had anywhere from 8 to 10 inches close to shore, but as we got out there further, you could definitely see some discoloration in the ice, and you could see where the slush pockets were and everything like that.
Yep. When I got out there a ways, we were off a Lone Tree Point, and there's always seems to be pressure cracks and everything off Lone Tree Point. But yeah, when we got out there, we definitely found some slushy ice, and
Yeah, it's always kind of weird when you start to drill your hole and you're going and you go about 2 inches, and all of a sudden it kind of gives way, like you're all the way through it, and you're just like, it makes you kind of stop for a second and just kind of check yourself.
pucker up a little.
Yep, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, whoa, when you just keep on drilling down, it's like, whew, I'm glad that there's more ice down there.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, we caught one little perch there, had a few other hits. We marked some fish, but it just didn't seem like they fully really wanted to commit to anything.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't good.
I mean, but, we talk about it all the times. That kind of makes us appreciate the trip, the good trips where you go out there and you hammer fish. I mean, you got to have those trips where, you struggle a little bit. I mean, but because it's a learning thing. It's the next time. I mean, we talked about it a lot on the way home. Like, we reflected on the day of, man, we just didn't, what did we do that we needed to change? What were the fish, how are the fish responding? How do we need to respond to it the next time?
Yep.
I mean, a lot of times I think a lot of people will just be like, oh, fish just weren't biting. And it's just like, well, they'll bite. Fish will bite. You just got to try to figure out a way how to do that.
Yep, and I mean, I feel like we were pretty mobile. Maybe we should have ventured a little bit farther in different directions. But yeah, when the ice, when you're a little unsure on the ice, you don't want to adventure too far. There in Emerson, there was kind of a little bit farther out, there was a spot where the snow had almost drifted up or something like that, and no one was going over that and farther out, so I wasn't going to be the first one to go out there. So
yeah, that's for sure. And it seemed like we kind of were finding the fish. We fished some hard bottom. We fished over weeds. It seemed like right on that transition is where we kind of saw the majority of the fish, and the ones that were willing to bite.
Yep.
I mean, the ones that we were sitting on the weeds, it seemed like they were a little bit smaller fish, and that's kind of where the other fish were, kind of cruising back and forth there, like the predatory fish, like the northerns and the bass. I mean, you caught a couple. I mean, you caught a couple decent largemouth bass.
Yeah, that one that I caught, that first one, he definitely looked bigger when he was down in the hole. I thought, oh boy,
yeah.
here's something. But yeah, it was probably 16 inches, 15 inches maybe. Yeah, it
Definitely something nice to tug on the other end of the line to get this season started off with.
I was all right with it.
I mean, and that kind of, the largemouth bass is kind of an overlooked species during the winter. A lot of people kind of look at them like, man, it's like, oh, I caught a largemouth bass. Oh, it's just a bass. I mean, a 16-inch largemouth bass
on light
fun.
tackle.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to catch, and at least it's something. You're catching something. I mean, yeah, we were targeting bluegills, but we're not going to pull the jig away from anything that wants to bite.
Yeah, we're not prejudiced when it comes to fishing.
Exactly that, especially on a slow day like it was. I mean, if you're willing to grab on, we're going to try to give you a ride.
Yep. I was talking to a guy at work about it today. It is crazy when you hook a largemouth bass in the summertime and they're flying out of the water and, they're getting wild and, putting up a heck of a fight. And, you catch them on light tackle through the ice and, I won't say that it doesn't put up a fight, but it's not a ton more than, a big bluegill or something.
No.
It's really kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's just that cold water that kind of got them lethargic a little bit. So obviously they can't jump.
Yeah, right. No, I think they're definitely more of a warm weather fish. Down in Florida, Texas, that's where the chunks come from.
And and it is fun. That's the fun thing about fishing at Okoboji. It's the fun thing and the frustrating thing. I get frustrated I'll admit it. I got frustrated, a little flustered on Saturday because of the sight fishing deal. Because you can see them down there, and it's just like you're trying so hard. It's like, do I jig more? So you start jigging more, then all of a sudden they kind of stop and they're hesitant. So you just stop dead, and all of a sudden they start to come forward a little bit, and then it's really trying to get little things like how you were talking about on the way home about your line tie.
Yep. I really try on that check eye jig to make sure that my bait sits at a 90-degree angle from my line, and you want to make sure that it's not spinning when you're jigging. A little bit of spin, a little bit of action isn't bad, but yeah, you really got to be careful, that when that fish comes up, if you start jigging really light, that it doesn't start spinning, because they're going to be out of there. But when you're sight fishing like that, you can kind of tell, if I jig a little bit lighter, it kind of spins this way. If I jig a little bit heavier, it goes the other way. And I really try to, whatever way that fish is coming in from, I really try to flip my waxworm around that way, so that when they do come in, if they do bite, I can set the hook. Nothing's more frustrating than when it comes and bites the jig head, and your hook's sitting out. And
that happened a couple times for me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that is frustrating. And one thing that I think that you utilize, we've talked about it before, is the new craze is kind of the longer rods for like hole hopping, so you're not bent down all the time. But you kind of like to utilize a short rod when you're sight fishing like that, and it seems like does it give you more control over that jig, do you feel?
I feel so. I fish a lot with a 13 white noise in an 18-inch rod, ultralight, and yeah, I just feel like with that tungsten, I just barely have to flick my wrist just a little bit, and I get good action on that jig. And as soon as they come in, when I'm not sight fishing, if I'm over on east catching yellow bass or something like that, when something comes in on my Vexilar and it merges with my jig on the flasher, I immediately shift my focus down to my rod tip, and just the little vibration on the end of my rod tip, when I see that just go flat, like there's no vibration there anymore, I know I set my hook. And I set my hook a lot. Hook sets are free.
Oh, you might as well use them.
If I'm out there yellow bassing, I'll miss fish, 10, 15 times before I actually catch one. But the one thing about them yellow bass, I think it almost triggers them more when when that bait is flying around and they can't get to it.
Moving.
Yep. I don't know. That's really what's worked for me. I bought a new 18-inch rod from Glacial Lakes Outdoors, and I didn't catch a fish on it this weekend. That was really kind of my goal, but I didn't have it rigged up when I got out there, so I was rigging it up in between time, and yeah, it didn't work. But yeah, I really prefer the shorter rods. It's just something that I feel comfortable with. I have confidence in it, so that's what I do.
Yeah, it is all about the confidence. If you have confidence in something like that, that's what you should look for when you're getting equipment. It's not just saying like, oh, this person, just because this person says they love using it, doesn't mean that you're going to love using it.
Yep, that's right.
You might get that rod in your hand and you might get it out there. And this is any time of the year, and it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't, in your hands, it just doesn't feel right. Just because it's the popular thing that everybody is using and, oh, you need to use this, you're not going to catch fish if you don't use it. That's not necessarily. It doesn't have to be the most expensive rod. It doesn't have to be, this or that. It's just what is comfortable for you is what it should be about.
Well, I bought a JT Panhandler last year, and I'm not going to knock JT rods. It was a good quality rod, and I bought it, and, I was so sure I was going to light the world on fire with that rod. And I got out there, and I jigged a few times with it, and, it just wasn't what I was used to. And I honestly, I sold it. I sold it to a kid, from here in Lyon County, and I think he loves it. It wasn't for me. It is for him. Yeah, you got to do what you're comfortable with, what you have confidence in, and yeah, that's what it is.
Well, that's exactly right. That's why when you go in there, you buy new equipment, and you just get your hands on it. I mean, test it out in the store. See how it feels. I know you can't get the 100% feel of like whether you're ice fishing, how's it going to feel with this jig on it or with this reel paired with it. But I mean, you get it in your hands and feel it. Don't just go with the popular thing.
Yep.
But yeah, it was like I said, it was just nice to hear the augers, hear the sleds, the cleats on the ice, and everything like that.
It was a warm day. I fired up the heater just because I wanted to smell it.
The propane. I know. It's just like just to get that. It's kind of funny. I got home the other day, and my wife Emily had been up in Sioux Falls shopping, and she had bought some new soap, and she's like, "Well, I bought this one specially for you," and it was called like Frozen Lake or something like that. So I got to thinking, I was like, "Man, what does this Frozen Lake soap smell like? Does it smell like propane with a combination of waxworms and exhaust from the augers?" I mean, what is Frozen Lake? What is their definition of how that smells?
I got a feeling your definition of Frozen Lake and Yankee Candle's definition of Frozen Lake
just aren't the same.
No, they don't understand.
I'm not ever going to be a hand soap maker, I suppose. Just a user.
Well, if podcasting doesn't work out, maybe hand soap is our thing.
Yeah, maybe it is. I never know. I guess I could come up with some pretty good, maybe tree stand.
Yeah.
But yeah, going into Saturday, like we said, we just wanted to get out there, get the rods out, get the ice rods in the hands again, get out there jigging. It's kind of making that transition into it. It kind of felt good to have the short rods in your hand again.
Oh, yeah.
Out there with the light tackle.
Yep.
The tungsten jigs, and yeah. So from here on out, we're looking forward to it. Like you said, it was a nice day out there. It was like 40 degrees out there in your sweatshirt, running around, not having to have gloves on. It's just it's nice not having to wear gloves, and you can run around in whole hop.
Oh yeah. The wind picked up at the end of the night.
It did get a little
chilly
towards the end of the night. Yeah, but it was just nice to hear that hum of the Vexilars again. Just getting out there with your flashers. And we talked about it already a little bit, Scott. The difference between live bait and plastics. It seems like some days it's like they won't bite on live bait. They don't want to touch it. And then some days it's just like that's all they want. They don't want a soft plastic. Out of those two, which one would you say you prefer more? I'm
definitely when it comes to ice fishing, I'm waxworms all the way. Like on Saturday, I think I had one little plastic that was on a jig that I had rigged up last year, and it just happened to be in my jig box. But otherwise, I didn't even bring any plastics along. I don't know. When it comes to jigging, I feel like the scent that a waxworm, the juice that comes out of it, if you are going to get a fish that comes up, I think it's going to, I think that scent, in my head, this is the way I play it out, that, that scent is going to be what triggers them. I know some plastics are infused with some scents and whatnot, but maybe it's the same.
It's still just not the same as the real thing sometimes.
Yeah, that's just the way I feel. I've never really been one that uses minnows a whole lot, but then switched to summertime fishing, and, again, I don't really use minnows. I don't really use night crawlers. I'm almost all artificial bait in the summertime, and in the wintertime, I'm basically all jigs and waxworms. Even if I'm gonna jig a spoon and whatnot, I like to put waxworms on that, and
like a minnow head or a full minnow, yeah.
Yeah, and I know I've used minnow heads last year up on Ponset, and they really worked, but the waxworms were working that weekend too. Yeah, I don't know. What about you?
Well, I think I'm definitely a big artificial guy. I've tried to get into it more during the winter. Like you said, I used to always be pretty much live bait. But with the companies coming out with more and more options as far as plastics go during the winter time, it's a lot more convenient. I don't have to, like you said earlier, I don't have to, after a fish, you just got to make sure that it's kind of sitting on there straight and you're back down there fishing. I mean, you can unhook fish, let it go, or if you're going to keep it, throw it on the ice and you're back down there fishing. And sometimes that's a big key, like especially perch fishing when you have a school down underneath of you. The faster you can get it back down there, the better chance that you have of catching another one. So, like the convenience of it. I mean, it's tough. When you think about minnows, keeping minnows alive.
Yep.
I mean, it's that convenience. I don't have an aerated cooler or anything like that to keep minnows. So at the end of the day, it's just like, well, I look at it like I go out there and buy a dozen minnows. If I don't know that for sure that it's a minnow bite, it's like, well, now I got to throw them away.
Right.
Because it's hard to keep those alive. The waxworms, things like that, those are a little bit easier. You can bring them home. You can put them in a refrigerator, even though sometimes your spouse might not enjoy opening up the fridge and seeing the canister of them sitting there, so you kind of try to put them in a plastic bag and all that.
That's butter. That's
yeah,
butter.
Well, yeah, don't. That's no snack. Don't be using that. So, things like that play a big role into it.
Yep. And there's a lot of companies coming out with, new baits. They're mummifying waxworms now, injecting some goofy colors in them. And another thing is that new beaver tail bait. They're actually taking the meat out of a beaver tail, slicing it up into waxworm-sized chunks of meat. And, I think a lot of guys are having some good success with them. I bought some, and last year out kayak fishing, me and Ramsey used some when we were jigging for bluegills. I did not have success that day with them, but we weren't really catching much of anything. So, I won't blame it on those. I'll definitely give them a second chance. I just haven't yet.
Yeah, and I think their big sell on that is that you can catch many, many fish on one little piece of it.
Yep.
And if you can do that, it's nice because you're more efficient. You can fish faster. You can have your lure down there in the strike zone a lot longer. Things like that. Just little that makes a big difference in a day of fishing.
It's tough stuff, like even when we were done fishing at the end of the day to try to pull it off of your hook.
Yeah.
It got caught on the barb, and I mean it's tough stuff. It's not like a small chunk of steak. It's a totally different texture. And there too, like I was talking with the waxworms, it's got that juice, it's got natural
it's got
juice.
Flavor. Yeah,
Yep.
It's kind of got that scent that you talk about, that scent trail that puts it in the water. And at least, with the way the fur prices are, at least getting some type of use out of the beavers that you're catching.
That's true.
But yeah, and as far as like summer fishing goes, I'm big soft plastic guy.
Yep.
I always have a jig in plastic tied on. It doesn't matter where I'm at. It seems like I have, again, with that confidence thing, I have confidence in it. I love throwing Zoom flukes on a 1/4 ounce or an 1/8 ounce jig, and there's times where I'll go somewhere and I'll be fishing a different way, and I'm like, what am I doing? It's like, I'm going to get my jig rod out, put that on there, and I'm going to try catching them this way because I have confidence in that bait. But there too, I'm trying to get more comfortable with using some more live bait during the summertime. I really want to start fishing walleyes with like big chubs.
Yep.
Especially like towards the fall or even in summertime too, they work great, but just, bigger minnows, bigger chubs like that to try to catch some bigger fish.
Yep.
So, and, night crawlers, they have their time and place. One thing I don't like about night crawlers is just how messy they are.
Oh, yeah.
You get, in the boat,
Yep.
you can have a pretty big mess after the day, but if it's a night crawler bite, I'm going to bring night crawlers and try to catch them. And
night crawlers is it.
And it's always fun too. I enjoy throwing some leeches on sometimes too, throwing slip bobbers out there. It's a fun way to fish.
Oh yeah.
It's an easy way, like if you got some people come along, if you can get on a good slip bobber bite with, whether it be leeches or minnows or anything like that, or even night crawlers, it's a fun way for a lot of action, and anybody can really do it.
Yep. Yeah, you take your kids fishing, take people that, aren't familiar with, tossing jigs, slip bobbers are pretty easy.
Yeah, I did it a few years ago, actually quite a few years now. Toby Lorenzen and I brought him over to Spirit Lake, and yeah, we hammered walleyes all day long on slip bobbers. It was just a ton of fun.
You've never had that type of luck with Dan Snyder, have you?
No, not Dan Snyder. Every time he comes along, we don't do real well.
Yeah,
And
weird.
then he blames me that I put him in the back of the boat, and I back of the boat him. I don't give him any spots at any of the good stuff, but I think it's just because he can't catch fish.
Yeah, kind of like coyote shooting.
Yeah, he's getting there though.
He got one. He got one.
That's right.
Curse is broke.
So yeah, I mean, overall, it was a good weekend.
Yep.
Got out there on the ice.
Yep.
Looking forward to the next trip now.
Tight lines, and yeah, it was.
Yeah, hopefully we'll head up, get a trip going here in South Dakota. I know here, not this week, but the following week, Emily and I are going to go up in the Alexandria area, stay up there.
Have you ever ice fished up there before?
I've never ice fished up in that area, and I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I've talked about it before. We've spent a couple weeks up there during the summer. I'm really looking forward to giving it a go ice fishing. She's going to go off and ski, I think, if they have snow up there. I don't know what it's like up there right now, but
Yeah.
I'm going to go and do some ice fishing and hopefully hit up a few lakes up there.
Right on.
Yeah, I mean, so now here comes that special segment of the show tonight. We're going to ask each other a question, totally unscripted. We don't know what we're going to ask each other. Well, we know what we're going to ask, but Scott doesn't know what I'm going to ask him, and I don't know what he's going to ask me. Scott, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first, just in case we happen to have the same question, then I don't look dumb.
And then well, you don't look anything online. You just sound dumb.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this.
All right.
All right, so this is a two-part question.
Two-parter. Ooh.
Two-parter.
Do I have to answer it in the form of a question like Jeopardy?
Yeah.
You're
Yep.
going to do your best Alex Trebek?
All right, Matt, what are your two favorite species of fish to catch?
My two favorite species of fish to catch. Well, I've always been kind of a bass guy. So I really enjoy catching bass. It really doesn't matter if it's largemouth or smallmouth. I mean, there's nothing better than flipping up into the reeds and, feeling that thunk of a largemouth and setting that hook and ripping it out of there. Same way I love drop shotting for bass, for smallmouths. It's a lot of fun. You got that line down there.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty soon you just feel that little tick and you set that hook and that rod bends over. But I'm slowly walleyes are really starting to
Yep.
catch up to all that stuff, and I'm really, really starting to enjoy the walleye fishing a lot more. So I'd have to say bass and walleye are probably my two top favorite fish
All
to
right,
catch.
bass and walleye. So now with that, if you could only catch one of those and you'll never be able to catch the other one, which would be it and why?
It's a walleye. I think I would pick walleye as my one that I would want to keep catching because I've gotten a lot better at it the last few years. You can catch them a variety of ways in a variety of places.
Yep.
I just feel like my confidence with walleye fishing is starting to grow more and more. And like I said, you can go out there, you can troll for them and catch them trolling. You can go out and pitch jigs and catch them that way. You can slip bobber for them. And they're all over.
And you can eat them.
And you can, and they're tasty. I mean, not that you can't keep bass and eat them, but walleye is more of a fish that people
acceptable to keep.
Yeah, more acceptable to keep and eat. Just for that fact, and you're starting to see more walleye tournaments starting to become more and more popular. And I just think that's one reason I've always enjoyed the bass fishing part of it is because of like the tournaments and all that stuff. But
Yep.
now you're starting to see more and more walleye tournaments, and I'd like to fish a few more of those. And I just really walleye is something that's really taken over for me the last few years.
Yep.
So that's a good question. I wasn't expecting that one.
Well, I've had 24 hours to think about it.
It's kind
So
of deep in a way. I was like, wow, like that second part of it. It's like, wow, this is deep thinking with Scott. Maybe that's the next podcast you could start. Deep thinking with Scott.
deep thinking.
With Scott. All right. My question for you. If you're going on an ice fishing trip, whether it be we'll just say it's a day trip, what's the one piece of equipment that if you forgot at home that you'd be like, I'm I'm turning around. I'm not going. I can't fish today. And I'm not talking like obviously an auger. People are like, well, you need an auger to fish. Well, yeah, obviously you need an auger to ice fish to drill a hole. But I mean, what's that one piece of equipment that you can't fish without? I gotta have it.
I think that would be my Vexlar. I for a lot of years before I had a Vexlar, my brother had a Vexlar. I told him, you don't need a Vexlar, I can catch them without, and I did, I caught fish without it, but, and I guess it's one thing if you're out on West Okoboji and you can sit, in one of the bays and sight fish, but yeah, otherwise it would definitely be my Vexlar if I'm in a spot where I can't sight fish. I've just gotten so used to, looking at that and, fishing that style of fishing with looking at my Vexlar. I guess if it wasn't that, it would definitely be my black check-eye jig.
Yep. You've caught a lot of fish on it.
I don't know if it's been 2-3 years ago. I bought a black check-eye jig with the glow dots on it, and that is my jig. I mean, if you look in my jig box, I've got, two orange ones, 2 gold ones, 2 whatever, and the black check-eye jigs, I think I've got 15 of them in there. And
it doesn't matter where we go. That's the first thing down the hole.
Oh, no matter what.
And actually now for a lot of us, it is.
Yeah, I mean,
it's been very successful.
Ever since I started catching fish on it, I've gone and told it on the mountain, and there's no doubt in my mind that is the best jig, and I don't know.
Well, again, it's the one you have confidence in. It's the one you've had success in multiple places.
Oh yeah,
That's a big thing about it is it's not like you just go to one spot and you're always catching them on that. And it's like, oh, okay, and then you go to a different spot and you're not catching anything on it. You catch fish no matter where you go when you use that. It seems.
Yep. East Okoboji, West Okoboji, Lake Pahoja, Lake Poncet. I've done really good always using that jig, and even on walleyes. I think people think that a walleye, big walleye isn't going to bite that little jig. I've had it plenty of times where I've caught big fish on that little jig.
Do you have any of the bigger, like the biggest size they make like that for like walleyes or anything like that?
No, I don't. I always use the same size. I think it's a 3 millimeter or
something like that, 3.5 or something.
Yep, and that's just what I use, and
yeah. And then as far as that Vexlar goes, it does well, the flasher, I guess it's not just Vexlar. It could be about anything. Right. Any type of those flashers or screens, it makes a huge difference.
Yep.
I used to be that way too. I used to be the guy that growing up, we never had those. We just go and we'd fish, watch your bobber down the hole, jig it every once in a while. But when I broke down and bought one, it changed everything. It was like, wow.
Well, and at least then like, hey, I'm on fish. If you sit
not only that, but just for purposes, it's nice knowing that there's fish down there. I mean, it keeps you fishing, it keeps you working, trying different things. But just to know like the depth,
right?
You're going out there, you're drilling. It's like, oh, this hole is, it's 8 foot in this hole, and then you only go 6-7 feet over, and you're down to like 12 foot. You're just like, okay, we're kind of
on a shelf here.
Where we need to be. And you can, this weekend too, when we were hole hopping, you could see when there was weeds down there. So it shows all that stuff, and it helps play a big role.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, well, guys, that's probably going to be it for the night for us. Hopefully everybody got out there this weekend, enjoyed this weather. Again, the ice is still pretty sketchy over in this area, down in this area, wherever you're listening from. So when you're going out there, keep using that safety precautions. Have the ice picks along, spud bar your way out there if you need to. Don't just throw caution in the wind just because you see people out there. We're going. Yeah, use your heads, but get out there and enjoy it. Yeah. Thanks for listening again. This was episode 4 of the Midwest Angler Podcast. I'm Matt Deitch.
Scott Sturman.
Tight lines, guys.
Thank you.